Welcome to the podcast, first episode, and I'm excited to be here. Admittedly, a little bit nervous. This is my first podcast episode. I've made some videos and things before, but welcome. We're going to see how this goes over time, like anything you're doing, but I'm committing to showing up. And as mentioned before, we're looking to see what life is about. We're all on this human journey together. It's called the Whole Life Podcast. So, what does it take to live a whole life? What things do we need as humans to do to feel the most content, to feel the most stable, to feel the happiest throughout our life? So, this will be a constant journey diving into different parts of that and exploring through our own musings and discussions, and also through talking to other people, interviewing other people that are exploring the same things. And this doesn't necessarily mean optimizing our life or being the most productive person that we could possibly be in any one given subject, but more so how to live a good life and to feel okay at the end of the day. Because I think that's our biggest goal is, or maybe we aren't even aware of it as a goal, but just to feel okay and feel content when we're faced with the length and variety of the human experience. So without further ado, we'll just dive into the subject of today's episode, which is unlocking the gate. And it's very apt for being the first episode of a podcast, just because we're going to be talking about gatekeeping, imposter syndrome, credibility, teachers, certifications, and things like this. And especially you maybe being new to knowing me and my background. Who am I? Why should you be listening to me? And that's what I want to talk about today. And we're going to first start with gatekeeping and why it's called unlocking the gate. Just to understand, especially in the age of the internet and the age of online learning, especially, and online connection, there's so many certifications out there and there's so much free knowledge, but there's also this idea of gatekeeping, which, if you're not familiar, it basically is keeping the information or the secret knowledge, in some cases, a secret or to yourself, unless someone is going to pay you or come to one of your retreats or something like this. And it's actually an effective marketing strategy. And I don't always agree with it, but I do understand the methodology behind it, because if we want to be a speaker or a teacher or offer a service that is education, giving that information away for free is basically giving our product away for free. So I can understand the people that do it, but I also understand there's a way to find the information, and there is nothing that is completely secret, as there is no secret life hack to anything that we want to learn in life. There's just learning about it, learning different ways, even with all these things that we hear, like this term hacking our biology, or hacking our schedule, or hacking our bank account, or house hacking, is kind of an odd term, because there's no such thing as actually hacking in the same sense like you would hack into a program or into someone's account, because it's actually just finding the relevant information to either be healthy, or to, in house hacking, rent your house out in ways to pay your mortgage or things like that. I don't want to get too deep into it, but there's really, no actual sense of hacking. We're just learning new information, and learning things that are potentially healthier for us or more efficient or quicker in these different categories. So when people are gatekeeping these things, one of the benefits to paying someone that it may seem like they're gatekeeping is we can waste and spend a lot of time looking for information. A lot of things that I've learned on my own, a lot of this time is compiling the information from different resources. So then we can look at somebody that seems like maybe they're gatekeeping or they have a certification or a course. What it really means typically is they've created a concise lesson plan. They've done the work to find all the information, and you're paying them to have access to this expedited form of learning. So if you're thinking about a course or a certification or something, what you're really paying for is an organized lesson plan. So in other words, you're paying for your time. So if you don't want to go to the trouble of going down these YouTube rabbit holes or listening to a collection of these podcasts or resources or reading books, we can find a really concise way that someone's provided us. So in some ways, I understand gatekeeping, and it's nice to pay the people that are providing these things. And so that kind of takes me to the next subject in this is, how do we understand if something's credible or not? People on the internet can offer up any credentials that we want or that they want, and we don't necessarily look into them. We kind of unspokenly or unknowingly make these assumptions based on other people's perception. So a lot of times the podcasts you end up listening to were recommendations or a recommendation from a recommendation. But, a podcast that I like to listen to once in a while is the Huberman podcast. But I've never looked to see if Andrew Huberman actually teaches at Stanford. Now, I think there would be a lot of backlash if he didn't, but I've never actually looked into his credentials. But the point about that is that if we're listening to someone else, they can say whatever they want. And that's why it's my impression to start, or really my intention, not impression, but my intention to look at and review materials constructively and critically and have a sense of critical thinking and not just take people's words for things. And I don't mean to encourage you to doubt anything that comes along, but just start actually listening to the information and how it's presented when it comes to you. Because in addition, just because Andrew Huberman works at Stanford doesn't mean that he would be a great podcast facilitator or offer relevant information. I've had many teachers in the past who are qualified, certified teachers, but they actually aren't very good teachers. And it's not, not to disparage them as individuals, but some people I relate to more or less, or I learn better one way or the other. So that's the next part, is when we come to a program or a certification or a training, we're looking at the teacher, their credibility, but then also, do we enjoy the way that they teach? I've found over the years that I go back to the same people mostly because I enjoy the way that they talk and I enjoy the way that they present. So actually it could be the best, most educational thing in the world, but if I don't like the way their voice sounds or how they talk about it, I'm not going to continue listening to what they say. So half of it is what they're saying, but another big part is how they're saying it. And you can learn and practice how to say things, but that's still only going to relate to a certain group of people. You're not going to make everyone happy. And it's okay not to like everything that you come across. So when we're looking at different programs that we're thinking about taking or learning, and especially in the world of wellness, start to look at the person and how you relate to them. And it's okay not to prefer everybody, but that goes into another part where when we're starting to think about how we choose someone to listen to or what we like to listen to, we can start also being aware of our prejudices, whether we like to hear things, whether we're making assumptions about a person's background or things like that. It's funny as I'm saying this. So this is like a side note talking to you as a podcast. I'm not going to edit this out, but it's hard to say things in a way and then not think about like, oh, I'll edit that out later. But I want this to be as natural and as fluid as we can. So maybe you might think of this as randomly, but I also really want to connect personally to the people that are listening to this and have this deep connection of me struggling through the process, learning and growing, and us going on this exploration. So bringing it back to credibility and why listening to me is, this is my first podcast. How does that make me credible for you to listen? I've done trainings and gone to school in the past, but are you going to believe me more if I list off all those certifications, or are you going to listen to this podcast and the things that I'm saying, and does it create intrigue and cause you to want to think about these things deeper on your own? That is my main goal behind this. And I don't need you to hold me on this pedestal, but this is a conversation between people in this human experience. So when we're looking into things and learning other things, also look, are we holding it on a pedestal like this is the absolute pinnacle of education and success in teaching, or are we really listening critically so we can open our minds to find our own awareness? And that's the whole goal of this episode, is that it's not the things that I can put on paper to let you know that I'm credible, but it's the way and the substance of the things that I'm saying. And so if you can find someone that you relate to their values in the things that they're talking about or the things that they're teaching, that is how we're going to pursue our education and our path forward. At the end of the day, there's no right or wrong path to go forward, but we find people that we relate to. And we subconsciously, this is where our confirmation bias comes in. Our preferences and our confirmation bias overlap, where in some cases, are we just looking for things to support our beliefs, our existing beliefs, or are we really listening and opening our mind to different possibilities? And if we're falling victim to confirmation bias, where we are subconsciously looking for information that already confirms something that we believe, rather than looking at all the information with an unbiased view, actually critically thinking, those are things to think about when we're pursuing teaching opportunities or certifications, or listening to people's credentials. Because really, the real credential is everything after they've told you why you should listen to them. It is nice, they are good hints, like if you're listening to someone talk about health and they say they're an accountant, maybe that doesn't match up. you better off, obviously, like, I'm a medical doctor, I'm a naturopath, and this is why I have some background in health. It's a good hint, but it doesn't mean that they're necessarily correct. And also, along with that, with so many differing opinions and things, even doctors are going to have different opinions on the same subject. A big one you're aware of, just an example, is a meat or a carnivore diet, eating animal products at all, or being a vegan. There is a big divide between doctors and people that choose one side or the other. Or are we critically thinking and figuring out which works best for us? And then, and then that takes us to finding out what works best for us. And then as we're learning something, how does that translate to then being able to teach someone else? When is it appropriate for us to show someone else or teach someone else or give someone else a certificate? And this is where the imposter syndrome comes in, because if we're attached to all these credentials and degrees and things, like if we are thinking that the person that we learned from, we should be at that same level before we can teach, no one would ever teach. If you think back to the beginning of human history and when we started showing each other things, there was no certification how to walk. There was just someone that started walking, and then someone else tried to do it, or someone else showed someone else to do it. Same thing with speaking. We didn't start off with some certificate or degree that we got for speaking. I mean, there is now that you can get. There's many different public certification or public speaking certifications you can get, classes on public speaking, which can be really beneficial. But if you want to be a public speaker, you can also just do it. And then when you make the choice, or you have a passion to show someone else, this is where some personal critical assessment comes in. Is you need to assess, do you feel qualified to show someone what you have learned? Because at the end of the day, anything that we're teaching or showing someone is really just showing someone and consolidating our efforts. So the benefit of having a teacher is they've already gone through something, and they can tell you and show you the common pitfalls and show you the best exercises to do and the things that are most effective. That's it, pretty much. So if you're looking to get into teaching in any form, or leading someone at work or anything, we're assessing if we feel like we have something valuable to share. And if you do, that's enough. Now, imposter syndrome, it goes really deep and wraps itself around you and your insecurities and why or why not you're worthy of teaching. But really, like, coming from a humble place, and also avoiding the gatekeeping can feel good, especially when you're starting out, because you want to be honest and transparent about your level. You don't want to be deceitful and say that you're more qualified than you are, or present yourself. So, you don't want to start teaching a master's in philosophy class if you're only capable of teaching the basics of philosophy. You want to just teach the things that you're just beyond, the things that you have already learned. And almost every time that I have made the choice to teach something, I have worried if I know enough or I have done enough planning. And every time that I've done that, when I've come into it honestly, it has been clear that I have plenty to offer. can answer people's questions. I have the confidence to show people the things that I've learned. As one of the examples is, I led a mushroom hunting workshop, and this can be a very, even as I'm saying this, I'm sure you're wondering, are there a lot of deadly and poisonous mushrooms? And there are poisonous mushrooms, but if you show someone how to use the resources, the books, the online materials of how to identify mushrooms and the safe handling practices, that's enough. And you start to realize that it's if you're being safe, it's not as deadly dangerous as it seems. And when I first started teaching mushroom hunting workshops, I was definitely just worried that people were going to be there that knew more than me. But I found every single person I was extremely helpful to. And I didn't pretend like I was just going to know every question. Like, we found mushrooms that I'd never identified before, and we got to go through and look them up. But I digress. But so then if you do decide to teach something, the next step is, if the class, it's all just trial and error. So if there's something you teach and you feel like it wasn't well received or it didn't helpful, readjust the class and try again, or offer something else, or offer more information, or maybe offer less information. Sometimes we try to pack. I've had teachers that are way too advanced for teaching an entry-level course, where they just start going way over the top, talking about things that we have no reference of. And that can be just as, I don't know if harmful is the right word, but just as harmful as not offering enough. So we want to reassess every time we offer some sort of training. And that takes us to the next point, that if we're looking to offer some trainings, what is a certification? And at the end of the day, all these degrees and all these certifications, they're made up. I know that sounds crazy, maybe, but it all starts from zero at the end of the day. Going back to the example, we didn't just learn to talk and then get a certification for it. There's no certification when we're first learning how to talk. But at some point, someone put together a course or a class and started doing it long enough, and then decided, I'm going to create a piece of paper or a trophy or a medal or something marking this achievement, and having physical representation of our accomplishment. It doesn't take away, it doesn't improve the fact that we went through all the time, but it is more of a personal accomplishment. We get to have this thing that we can look at that says that we did something and we learned to talk, or whatever the class or certification. A lot of the things I see now are breathwork certifications. And those can be amazing because we get to have a lot of practice, learn a lot of different things in a concise thing. But like, there's a lot of breathwork courses that have a certification but don't have any board. So whoever owns that business just decided that you are now certified because we said so. And there's some instances, like, you could be certified by the Yoga Alliance, which that in itself is still just a business that decided, we're going to review these programs, and then people can say that they're certified against our metrics. But there's also a lot of other certifications out there that people are just making up. Now, I'm not saying that you should make up a certification program, but I say this to open the door that if you have something that is worth value to share with others, that you have just as much right to share that with people as anyone else that's doing this. And you don't have to make everyone happy, and you won't be able to, but you'll find the students that your class or your certification is appropriate for. And again, like, you don't need to create a certification. And if you don't have a lot of experience, I probably wouldn't encourage it, because I think the value in a certification is somebody saying that I have basically an approval from this more credible source. So if you don't have a lot of credibility to begin with, then maybe a certification isn't right. But offering a class, absolutely. Then maybe after you offer a bunch of classes, you could offer a certification teaching that style of class. And it just kind of develops over time through experience. But all of this is also related to how we find podcasts, how we find teachers, how we find books. And I see and hear so many quick judgments and quick opinions and quick prejudice towards people, whether it be because they're a man or a woman, or they're white or they're black, or they're rich or they're poor, or they have experience or they don't have experience. There's all these different things. And none of those things necessarily make them more or less qualified. But trying to let go of our biases and prejudices and really assess the value of what somebody's saying, and don't take the things that people are saying at face value, but really think about for yourself. Because someone can get up here and tell you that it's the absolute truth, but at the end of the day, it's probably not necessarily right or wrong, but it's somewhere in between, and it might be right for you, or it might be right for someone else, but it's not always right for the third person. So not taking things at face value, but actually thinking for ourselves. And I've covered a lot today, and so I just want to leave you with remember to not make assumptions. And really, you are capable of doing whatever you want in this life. You have the permission from me and yourself to pursue your path, especially if you're coming with love and honesty and really an intention to help people. Because at the end of the day, if you feel like you have some imposter syndrome, like, what's your real goal? If it's to help people and be honest and loving, then it's okay in my book. And I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Maybe it was a little all over the place, but I'm hoping to continually refine it. Please also comment, send messages about things that you might want to hear me talk about. And also, I'm looking to interview some people. So if there's other podcasters or artists or musicians or spiritual leaders or anyone that you'd be interested in hearing from, I can reach out to them and see if they'll interview with me and have tea or coffee and chat for a while. So please, I want this to be a community discussion and a community effort. So, and if you want to help the podcast, please, refer it to someone so they can refer it to someone, and share the YouTube videos. We'll be doing a Patreon at some point, and if I've gotten around to it, there will be links to some sponsorships and products of our own. So if you want to support this effort, please check those out in the description. And otherwise, I hope we get to connect at some point, and let's continually search what it means to live a whole life, find fulfillment and contentment. So Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And I will see you next time.